This is the VIP Podcast, Virginia in Politics. Let's listen to host Chris Saxman explore the personalities and policies that connect the Commonwealth. The VIP Podcast is brought to you by the VCTA, Broadband Association of Virginia, and Virginia Free. The views and opinions expressed here do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of the VCTA and Virginia Free or our sponsors.
Hi, this is Chris Saxman on the VIP Podcast, brought to you by VCTA, the Broadband Association of Virginia, and Virginia Free. And with us today on, Policy Nerd Disneyland is the president of VCTA, the president, Ray LaMura, the Broadband Association of Virginia, VCTA. First, Ray, thanks for putting on this program, first of all, and
Glad
sponsoring
to do it.
You guys have been a real leader, and I think it's been a help to people to engage deeper into Virginia politics. But let's talk about VCTA and the Broadband Association of Virginia. Why the name change?
Sure. Well, we were the Cable Telecommunications Association formed in 1966.
Wow.
And just over time, the evolution of the products and the services that our companies developed, it was necessitated change.
Okay.
And in fact, it's our industry that brought about really broadband. It is through really the cable telecommunications industry that brought this product forward.
Well, it's an amazing evolution over time, just in the short time that we've known each other, only 20 years.
Right.
But broadband, what is broadband?
So what it is, it's really the connectivity to the internet.
Okay.
And what we're trying to do here in Virginia is really setting the model for the nation.
Okay.
So we work to create the public-private partnerships where an internet service provider and a locality will work together to form a plan. And then we work with the leaders in the General Assembly to create a pot of money that will be available to local governments that they could access to bring broadband to the
let's
unserved.
define for the audience, what is broadband? When you talk about broadband, everyone goes, oh, it's internet access, speed. They think about a bigger cable coming into their home. What really is it?
So it's really it's the technology that's able to bring you the internet.
Okay.
Now, when we define speeds, that is really the access point with which folks can download and upload information.
Right.
And we work with the FCC at the national level to work on what is the appropriate speed that would set the baseline for what is someone who is served with broadband or not served with broadband.
Okay.
And prior to the evolution really of our product, broadband was brought over copper lines, DSL, which was very, very, very slow.
But faster for the time.
But fast for the time. It was the new offering for the time.
Right.
Interestingly, our companies actually worked together and have formed an organization out in Colorado called Cable Labs, where every day we have engineers going in and seeing what can we do, what can we create with this technology, and where can we go in the future.
Okay. It sounds boring for most people, but it's the essence of our communications, isn't it? This is as Al Gore said, the information superhighway.
Right.
That was I don't want to give any more credit to Al Gore than he's already tried to take, but the fact of the matter is this is the future of the economy, being able to transmit information, to communicate, to generate all the different applications that are out there.
Right.
This is the interstate highway system and the electrification of the country all in one.
Right.
Fair to say?
Very fair to say. When it's exciting is to see what is the application of it. That's when it's exciting. That's when we could talk about telehealth and smart cities. But when you're implementing it, when you're putting it in the ground or on a utility pole, it gets pretty dry.
Right.
The topic is pretty boring. Eyes glaze over when you start talking about attaching to a utility pole.
Until it's like the electricity. It's boring and it's unsexy until you don't have it.
Exactly.
Until the lines go down, like, what do you mean? Where's my internet?
That's exactly
Dial up,
And prior to that, it was the cable TV. It's like, what is going on?
What's happening here? Who's going to mind the kids?
Right.
This is my babysitter.
Right.
But no, seriously, everyone's okay with electricity until they flip the light switch and the light doesn't come on. Oh, what's going on? What do you mean the power's out?
Right.
So it has to be constantly on, constantly available, and constantly up to speed with all the different downloads and the speed with which things can be blocked.
Right.
in getting, so this must be a myriad of very complex issues for your trade association.
It's highly complex. It's moving parts all the time. And I came from an industry before where one issue was in one bill and it related to one topic.
Right.
Today, there are 15 issues in one bill, and the impact could be very significant to the success of the Commonwealth.
Well, because everything is gone through the internet.
Right.
Everything is transmitted through the internet. I mean, this is adorable. You brought these facts on paper, and I'm still a paper guy. My kids look at me like, dude, you are old.
Right.
You know, someone will send me a slide deck and I print it off. They're like, this is why you have a laptop, Dad. And I'm like, I need that in front of me. I'm a tactile guy. I mean, I like seeing this in front of me. But the amount of space this takes up on the internet,
yes,
times the tens of thousands of millions of times it's happening,
right,
has to be available for all of us.
Right. And there's two really elements about this. So building infrastructure to residents is one element. And then building infrastructure to a commercial site is another element. So we're working very closely with the public policy to address building it to residents, to homes.
Right.
And that is the creation of the Virginia Telecommunications Initiative, which is to bring that combination of public-private partnership to the unserved. We also work with Go Virginia and Virginia Department of Economic Development, who has identified all of these site characterizations and the 400 sites that they want to make available. And broadband is an important element to that. But at the end of the day, we're really the last tier that needs to go in. I mean, is a PetSmart going into that site, or is it Carillion Health?
Oh, yeah.
So there's different speeds and
demands,
redundancy and demands that we need to bring in with those elements of the offering. So you have to work with all of these different pieces and moving parts that go along with that.
I would imagine this takes a lot of time. And people, I mean, you say complexity and people don't care after a certain point. Look, just get it done. But the nature of the complexity, the nature of the physicality of this is a physical infrastructure.
Correct.
That has to be delivered,
right,
and people just want it now.
Right.
They don't understand wait.
Right. And that's a great point.
So describe the process quickly as you can. I mean, we're limited in time, but it's your show. You do what you want. So how much time are we talking about here? What's it look like?
Well, today we've got a lot of challenges going on. So let me back up a little bit. Well, while we've created the VATI process, going through the Virginia Telecommunications Initiative.
Okay.
So that is the public-private partnership.
Got it.
We set up this model several generations of the legislature ago. 8 years ago, we set this up. But the legislature only funded it, and they put in $1 million in the pot.
Right.
And I said, thank you. We've got the guidelines all in place. But in many circumstances, it can cost us $100,000 a mile to build broadband.
Good Lord.
So $1 million, thanks, but that's not going to go anywhere.
Right.
So we were able, the industry worked with the legislature. It has to help pay for itself.
You can do it,
right,
but it has to be a return on that investment at some point. Maybe.
Well, it's asking us to go to places where it doesn't make sense to go.
Right.
We're not a public utility. So we're not like the water. We're not like the sewer. And we're being asked to go where residents don't have water and sewer even.
Right.
So what we've done is to create this process whereby you really want to have a strategic plan to identify those communities that will adopt the service once it's built, and then also get that infrastructure out there. But it takes time. So once we had this infrastructure language in place, sadly, the one benefit of COVID was the amount of federal dollars that came into the door. So over $700 million came to Virginia. We were able to plug and play.
Wow.
But now, just like many industries, workforce is a challenge. So every state in the nation has received money for broadband. Unlike Virginia, many states don't have a Virginia Telecommunications Initiative yet. So I'm getting phone calls weekly from my peers around the country about how did we set this up. So they have to set that process up where we're just waiting for it to get built now.
So it sounds like Virginia's a national leader in broadband delivery. Is that fair?
Correct. That's exactly right. We
Really?
are the model. We are
The model.
We are the model.
And what was the impetus becoming the model? I mean, how did that happen? Was it just the nature of the cycle in Virginia politics and the funding that's available? Is it the proximity of the federal government and the defense industry here in Virginia and the necessity of being a national model because of defense, or what?
I would like to take all of the credit for that, but I really can't. And we try to be forward thinking. We try to see what is coming around the corner, like the Wayne Gretzky philosophy,
But need drives a lot of the decision making. And there has to have been an overriding need that Virginia had that you saw and implemented, and I don't care, call it the Ray LaMura plan, whatever. I'm good with it. Ray LaMura, TM, trademark this thing. And you should deserve credit for it. But I mean, for the other states, I mean, we're not, I tell people not pejoratively, we're just not Wyoming.
Correct.
I mean, we are central to what goes on in this country and by extension, the world.
Yes. So to your point, I mean, having Northern Virginia and that economic engine and the demands that drive around that, Richmond and Hampton Roads, the Golden Crescent, and then having an outstanding university system that you have these things and connectivities where you want to bring talent to the pool. So that is one of the fun things I've been able to work with into the telehealth space, Dr. Karen Ruban at UVA, who was one of the patron saints really of telehealth.
Okay.
And so is working with her and Senator Wampler in the days on seeing where this technology can lead us into the future and how it is all moving that space. And then how do we get infrastructure built to those areas that are hard to get to?
Were there forces politically and in policy that were driving this, like, oh, look, this is coming, we've got to get ahead of this? Virginia has a unique political reality that I think we often don't really appreciate because of the dynamics. And that's one of the things this podcast I try to do is draw those out in the conversations. And this is why Virginia politics is so fascinating and so important to follow for people not in Virginia, but also people in Virginia, obviously. But I think there's a lot of, because we're a bellwether and because we do things off cycle of everybody else, I think there's an element of force that really pushes politicians, policymakers, trade associations to get ahead of the game.
As I sit back and think about it, I really think one of the drivers behind this really could have been the tobacco settlements that occurred and the change in the agricultural climate of Virginia. How the Commonwealth set up the Virginia Tobacco Commission to help economically depressed areas as the change in the tobacco industry occurred.
That makes sense.
And
what a
our
great
leaders in this space really were Senator William Wampler.
Sure.
And Congressman Rick Boucher at the time.
Okay.
Not typically political allies that you would see, but were
seeing... But this is not a partisan issue.
Not at all. And that's what I really enjoy working in this space because it's not partisan.
I don't think Wampler and Boucher were really partisan guys. I mean, they have obviously their moments. Right. But when you're down in Southwest Virginia, it doesn't matter. I mean, putting food on the table and jobs in the marketplace are really, really important.
Exactly.
So that makes the most sense.
So they were really the drivers behind, in my view, the drivers to help push this initiative of seeing where the puck is going and thinking down the line and trying to drive jobs.
That's a great analogy, especially for the Penguins fan who lost yet again in overtime because our goalie doesn't he likes watching the puck in the net. What the hell happened?
He's following the puck.
He follows the puck. But you also had to have the money from the tobacco settlement going towards these initiatives. It's nice to have dreams. Right. We want to build this, but if you don't have the money to build it, and then you can go to the bank and do all these things, but when you have a pot of money that came from the tobacco settlement, the master settlement agreement, that provided some funding which begets more funding. Right.
So quite frankly, after we set up the Virginia Telecommunications Initiative in the state budget, we went and worked with the Tobacco Commission. Evan Feinman, who was at the Tobacco Commission head guy there and then became Governor Northern Broadband advisor, helped to model the VATI guidelines within the Tobacco Commission framework. There's some regulatory policy things, but really, again, the focus was building broadband to the unserved, those who have nothing. If tax dollars are going to be used, it needs to go to areas that have nothing. Do not compete with it or create a competitive network with taxpayer dollars when you've got a provider there.
Right. And it does create an inequity and inequality in the total economic structure of Virginia. And imagine, I think Virginia has the greatest disparity in wealth and poverty in the country because of the inordinate wealth of Northern Virginia and the rural areas of the Commonwealth that have been left behind. Can you imagine not having the tobacco settlement to even get to this point where they're even remotely competitive?
Exactly.
And now you see people post-pandemic or during the pandemic moving and doing more remote work, none of this could have happened without broadband.
Exactly. And one of the things that we're working on this General Assembly session is a line extension program part 2. So last year, we worked with the Department of Housing and Community Development with all of the federal dollars that are now in play for broadband to create a grant system where if someone lives more than 300 feet from the road or where broadband exists, they could apply to DHCD, Department of Housing and Community Development, for a grant to extend that network.
Wow.
What we've kind of found is, the wrinkle is, we tied it to only families who are low to moderate income. And we could easily see very quickly that a regular family of 4 may have 2 kids in college. All of a sudden they're getting handed a bill from a contractor for $15,000 to build broadband to their house. Sometimes puts it out of reach and would ostensibly be a barrier for us to achieving universal broadband coverage. So this session we're working with the chairs of the Broadband Advisory Council, Senator Jennifer Boysko and Delegate Kathy Byron, to create a similar program called LECAP, which will allow regular citizens to apply and get a grant to build broadband to their home. And as we know, these are the toughest folks we're trying to get to now.
Right.
They are across a creek. They are across a railroad track.
Right.
They are a half mile from the road. They live on a farm. They want to live on the water. And so we're creating these programs because the federal dollars are there. We have all paid into this process to use the dollars. So use them to get us universal coverage. And quite frankly, Virginia, again, can be the leader to achieve this goal. When you think about,
is there any objection to that? I mean, people going, no, we shouldn't spend the money, or is it just federal money that's out there that can be spent there? It's like it's just banked and ready to go as long as people can understand that. We've talked about adoption issues of, you don't know what's available to you. I think that's probably another development in the future for your organization,
right.
The Broadband Association. It's knowledge based. You don't know.
Right.
And so oftentimes we assume it's available or it's not available.
Right. So, and this is where it really is important to work closely with the local governments.
Right.
Because they know where their residents don't have broadband.
Sure.
They get that. So working with the ISP, their internet service provider, who's closest to them to extend that service
right.
is just how it makes sense. And then you raise the point of adoption. It's interesting to be in an industry where you've got 2 battlefronts going on at one time. And it takes up a lot of time to explain this because, as you can see, this is not an elevator speech. So we've been working on the area of building and constructing broadband, but then we've also been working in the area, even in inner cities
right.
and localities, where broadband is literally at their doorstep. But for one reason or another, a family has not adopted the service. For some, they may not have the equipment to do it. For some, they may not have the ability to pay for it. In fact, 10 years ago, a number of our companies created programs where if families were on free and reduced school lunch, they could get broadband for $10 a month. And it was an outstanding program. But since then, with all the federal dollars coming in, the federal government is now providing a subsidy for these same type of households where they can get broadband for free, ostensibly.
Wow.
They're offering a $30 credit. So this takes the costs off the table for anyone.
And
so
most people don't even know this exists.
They don't know it exists. And we're trying to communicate as best we can with policymakers, with local governments. COVID made it a wrinkle because of just the restrictions of being close with everybody.
Sure.
And putting it on the internet doesn't help you when
They
people
don't
have the internet.
Right.
So we've been working with all of our elected officials really to kind of take it up during a town hall meeting and say, this is a federal program that's available to you and take advantage of it and really bring information back to your constituents.
So are there any pushbacks in the General Assembly to do these kinds of things? Are you finding resistance? Everyone's like, okay, yeah, sure, Ray, go do it. How can we help out? Is that the overall?
I would say
sense?
I would say it's bipartisan in lead.
How can we help? Exactly.
Some of the challenges from time to time, from a policy standpoint, is just because the word broadband is in a sentence of policy doesn't mean that it's a good idea. So we have to help educate folks on this is the plan we've created. Don't deviate from the plan. We're in the red zone.
Right.
Don't hike the ball over the quarterback's head and he's getting sacked on the 50. We're in the red zone to achieve universal coverage and then really being able to go after the elements of adoption, telehealth. I mean, you can imagine getting infrastructure out to Southwest Virginia where they can have access to the heart doctors or the brain doctors at UVA by a teleconference.
Right.
Is
that one of the primary selling points, is the healthcare component, or is it economic development, or just basic connectivity?
Basic connectivity, because people can work from home. Their kids, if a child does not have broadband in their home, they're losing every day. They're getting behind every day.
Right.
But the health aspects is absolutely fantastic.
I guess we'll wrap up with this one. Big tech, big data. These are starting to become political liabilities.
Right.
Fair to say.
Yes.
Is that entering the conversation in your industry at all as an impediment to further adoption, further connectivity, last mile extension of broadband? Is that entering?
So we see kind of the FANGs that are out there, the Facebooks, the Amazon. They are driving
FANG
different
stocks: Facebook, Apple, Netflix, Google, and Amazon, Apple.
Right. Yeah.
Okay,
So
FANG
they're all
stocks, not like FANG.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. They're driving different conversations that we're kind of very closely watching to make sure that it's not upsetting how the delivery of broadband is occurring. So we're watching these very closely. We keep a pulse on this, but some of those companies, lead in a different direction, and sometimes we just
Are they members of your organization?
No, they are not.
They are not.
No.
So okay, that's not you. Who are your members?
So our members are Comcast, Cox,
Okay.
Charter,
Okay.
Shentel,
Okay.
Nelson Cable, Breezeline. Who did I leave out? Altice,
Charter, Citizens.
Charter,
Okay.
Nelson Cable. So Virginia is fortunate that we have really the nation's leading telecommunications providers in Virginia.
Right.
And then you add in a Verizon, again, who's another national leader. We have those companies that are willing to invest in making these investments and bringing the greatest technology available to broadband space. And we continue to upgrade in this area.
That's exciting.
It's very exciting. It's not boring.
It's not boring. But for everybody else, it's unsexy.
Unless I'm talking about a utility pole. It's not boring. Yeah.
Well, thanks, Ray LaMura, president of VCTA, the Broadband Association of Virginia. Thanks for joining us on the VIP podcast, brought to you by Ray and the good people at VCTA to engage in Virginia politics. Virginia in politics, VIP, not a very important person, but Ray LaMura is both a VIP in politics and in Virginia. Thanks for joining us. Please subscribe, like, and share on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple. Thanks for joining us.